The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 361. Kiran ignored the snake and seized the red pouch. When he reached inside, he found that it was not paper or cloth, but something hard. He was startled. Did it not contain the Ludwig family's information? Crack! There was a sound as the snake tried to pull its tail out of the stone pillar. Knowing how strong the tail was, Kiran grabbed a bronze dagger hidden under his shirt. It was a plain and dull dagger with shallow grooves on the blade. However, the pattern engraved on the hilt was eye-catching. It was a ferocious dragon with its jaws open. Without the slightest hesitation, Kiran plunged the dagger into the snake's body. The squelch of flesh being punctured was heard, followed by the snake's howl of pain as it rolled swiftly to the side. Blood began to gush out from the wound on its back. Instead of being afraid, the snake grew wilder. Swaying its head, it struck Kiran again with crushing force. Kiran leaped into the air and dodged effortlessly. Seemingly overcome with rage from its failure, the snake thrashed around like crazy, trying to land a hit on Kiran. A callous look flashed in his eyes. Die, beast! With that, he propelled his body forward. When the snake saw Kiran charging in its direction, it immediately whipped its head around to bite him and thrusted its tail at him like a javelin. It attacked fast and sharp from the front and back, and its gaping jaws seemed to be able to swallow Kiran up. Kiran did not dodge, but rushed toward the serpent. The serpent became visibly angrier and more aggressive. Kiran arrived next to it at the same time its head and tail reached his side. If he continued to strike, he would also be stabbed. At the critical moment, he planted his feet on the ground and jumped up, nimbly avoiding the snake. The beast ended up snapping at thin air, and its sharp tail missed its target as well. However, its attacks showed no sign of slowing down. On the contrary, they pressed on relentlessly. With a sickening squish, the tip of its tail pierced its head, and its fangs sank into its tail. Overcome with pain, the snake writhed on the ground. As Kiran landed on his feet, the dagger in his hand drew a perfect arc in the air before slicing the snake's head clean off. With a splat, the serpent's head and tail detached from each other. The poor snake's jaws were still clamped around its quivering tail, but its body had become a separate part. After twitching twice, it drew its last breath. Kiran settled back down on the ground, and after regaining his composure, opened the pouch that he had obtained just now but had not yet examined. Inside was a piece of red jade with intricate carvings, including that of a lifelike dragon. However, what caught his attention was the faint swirl of energy on its surface. Kiran stared at the jade, slightly dazed. It was not the Ludwig family's information. He looked around again and realized that this was an energy pit in the winding shape of a dragon. Indeed, the two pillars were positioned where the dragon's horns were. Clearly, the jade had been placed here to absorb the energy. Once it was cultivated and worn on the body, the wearer could absorb the energy inside and improve their luck. Looks like whoever put this jade here knew a thing or two about earth divination. Kiran muttered to himself. Chapter 362. Naturally, he could not help wondering who it was. How did they even enter this place? It was already difficult to bypass the snakes outside, let alone this serpent inside. Holding the flashlight, he searched the cave again, but found nothing. He then followed the direction of the water flow toward its source and discovered a tunnel that could accommodate a person. After hesitating briefly, he squeezed himself inside. The tunnel was only a few meters long. It led to another room, wider than the one outside. He glanced around cautiously, but there was no sign of danger. He shone the flashlight on his surroundings. Aside from rocks covered with moss, there was nothing special. Just when he was about to give up, he spotted a glimmer of red reflecting the light from his flashlight. He walked over curiously and discovered that it was a red stone. To be precise, it was not a stone, but a red jade. On the jade was the dragon in Zachary's research materials. Kiran inhaled sharply. So the dragon jade did exist after all? He was getting more and more interested in this cave. What was going on? He squatted down to examine the stone, thinking that it had been placed there intentionally like the other stones. However, he soon discovered that it was a real stone that belonged there, and inside it was a red dragon which resembled the jade pendant he had seen just now. That person Zachary met is strange. They know this place well, but why did they behave so mysteriously? He mumbled to himself again, his tone full of curiosity and doubt. He reached out and touched the stone. Its coldness instantly seeped through his skin, sending a chill through his body. However, it was a comfortable kind of coldness. He tried to channel his internal force into the jade to assess its condition inside, but it did not work. After taking a turn about the room, he was surprised to find that the jade was part of a belt which stretched on endlessly. Kiran was astounded. Could this hidden natural jade belt be the reason PowerHub Investment Group was so intent on seizing Dragonsmount? If PowerHub's aim was to make money, what about the Imperial Dragon? Was it related to this red dragon? Kiran fell into deep thought. Another question occurred to him. Regardless of those organizations' intentions, why had the York family gotten involved in Dragonsmount? Moreover, his master as well as Serena's were all involved in protecting the mountain. The more he thought about it, the more puzzled he grew, and the more certain he was that there was a huge secret behind all of this. Stifling his curiosity, he continued exploring the cave but found nothing else. He then exited through the same path, this time heading toward the lower end. When he emerged from the cave, it suddenly dawned on him that he was standing at the prime location within his family's abandoned building complex, which coincided with the location of the energy pit. He was stunned. Had the York family built these buildings here because they were aware of this secret? In that case, had the secret been leaked by someone? Kiran's thoughts were in a muddle. "Mr. Kiran!" Just then he heard Frank's anxious shout from the top of the mountain. Suppressing his bewilderment, he whirled around and dashed up the mountain. Chapter 363. Halfway up the mountain, Kiran met Frank, who was running down in a hurry. Frank's face was drenched in sweat, and there were even bloody scars on his face. He looked extremely anxious. "Mr. Kiran, are you okay?" Frank said concernedly, but he was happy to see Kiran. Kiran shook his head and said doubtfully, "I'm fine. Are you okay?" When I went back, Zachary and the others were bleeding from their eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. You and Yvonne were nowhere to be seen, so I thought something happened to you. I was looking for you everywhere. "All of them were killed?" Kiran asked in shock. Frank nodded. "They were all poisoned to death. I'm not sure what kind of poison it was, but I'm certain the golden dragon didn't kill them." Kiran's face was grave. "Are there people hiding in the dark?" Frank quickly looked around vigilantly. "Let's go back and take a look." Kiran quickly walked up the mountain. Frank followed. When they got to the entrance of the cave, Kiran saw Wendell and Zachary dead on the floor. He walked over to inspect the corpses, but none suffered any physical trauma. It seemed they died while unconscious. The poison in their body was different from the poison in the pile of bones. Kiran's eyebrows were twitching constantly as he pondered. "Is Ms. Yvonne in danger?" Frank asked Kiran. Kiran's face grew even more solemn. He pondered for the moment and shook his head. Since they did not kill her on the spot, that means she's not in danger, or else they wouldn't have taken her away. Frank nodded. "That's true. What are we going to do?" Frank looked at Kiran and asked. Kiran glanced at the time and saw that it was almost dark. "We will hide and wait until 8 to see if anyone comes." Frank nodded. He was also curious to find out who was controlling the golden dragon. They found a place to hide. In a blink of an eye, it was 8. Kiran looked forward to seeing the person he was hoping would appear. However, it remained still and quiet. Frank looked at Kiran questioningly, but Kiran signaled to continue waiting. The two waited for another 2 hours, but to no avail. There was a trace of frustration behind Kiran's eyes. "It seems like we've been fooled. The people behind this came way before us. The fact that they were able to achieve this means they're very powerful. What do we do?" Kiran's expression was solemn. "We go back." Kiran stood up. "What about Ms. Yvonne?" Frank was worried about her. During the time they worked together, he began to admire her work ethic a lot. "We'll talk when we get back." Kiran got up to leave. Frank followed him to return to Bayville. As soon as they left, a beautiful figure of a woman appeared right where they were standing. It was Yvonne. She was just as beautiful and sickly as ever. However, she did not seem as fragile as before. Next to her was a golden snake, the golden dragon. Yvonne looked at Kiran and Frank as they walked away and smiled. "Kiran, you're my man. Snow can't take you away from me." She patted the golden dragon's head. "This cave belongs to you now." The golden dragon slithered as if it understood her. Then Yvonne sat down and regulated her breath. She laid on the ground, pretending to be unconscious. After Kiran and Frank descended the mountain, they returned to the city. He asked Frank to return to Xander Corporation while he went to Bayville Hotel to see if Yvonne was back. When the receptionist saw Kiran, they did not stop him. He went straight to Yvonne's room, but it was empty. Yvonne's scent still lingered in the room, but there was no sight of her. Kiran was doubtful, so he turned and walked out. After going downstairs, he still felt uneasy. He hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he drove back to Dragonsmount. An hour later, Kiran returned to the location where he was that morning and saw Yvonne unconscious on the ground. Relieved, he went up to hold her in his arms and placed a hand on her pulse. Her pulse was weak, but it was pretty much normal. Kiran tapped her 2 pressure points and, "Ah!" Yvonne let out a soft cry. She was over the moon when she saw Kiran. She immediately hugged him and said, "Snake." Kiran was taken aback. He looked around, but there was nothing. He patted her back and said, "There's no snake. Don't be afraid." Only then did Yvonne calm down and look at him. "Am I dead?" Kiran shook off his worries and smiled. "Didn't you notice that I'm still warm?" Yvonne sighed in relief. "I was scared to death." "What happened after I left?" Kiran asked. "As soon as you left, the golden dragon came out. I was so scared that I fainted on the spot. I was unconscious after that, so I don't know what happened." Yvonne tried to recall the situation. "The golden dragon appeared?" Kiran asked. "Yes." All the blood drained from Yvonne's face, and she seemed fearful. Kiran stood up and looked around, but he could not find any trace of the golden dragon. He frowned thoughtfully. "What's wrong?" Yvonne asked curiously. "Do you feel anything wrong with your body?" Kiran asked. Yvonne shook her head and blushed. I was not violated." Kiran froze and smiled embarrassedly. "That's not what I meant. When you went missing, Frank and I searched everywhere for you for a long time, but we couldn't find you. I even went to Bayville Hotel, but you weren't there. I went missing. How could that be? I was always here." Yvonne looked around. "That's what I'm confused about too," Kiran said truthfully. "Kiran, what was I possessed?" Yvonne hugged him with both arms as she tried to squeeze herself against him. She was still trembling in fear. Kiran was puzzled and said, "Let's talk about this after we get back." "Oh, okay," Yvonne said, stuttering from fear. Kiran felt bad, so he carried her down the mountain. Yvonne's heart was full, while Kiran's mind was full of uncertainty. They had come to Dragonsmount, and they had seen all of it. Some of Zachary's reports were true, and some were false. However, they missed the most crucial thing, the golden dragon. Most importantly, no one knows who killed Zachary and Wendell. Kiran felt as if he had gotten himself into a whole new riddle. Dragonsmount was truly a mystery. Kiran drove Yvonne to Bayville Hotel while she was still shivering from the cold. When he carried her back to her room, Yvonne was smiling in anticipation. Chapter 364. You can come down. It's safe now. Upon entering the room, Kiran gently patted Yvonne's shoulder. However, she only clung tighter to him. Kiran grimaced slightly, not wanting to get too close to other women. Yvonne was quick to sense his reluctance. Despite the sharp pang in her heart, she said feebly, "Let me lie down on the couch for a bit. I feel really weak and don't have the strength to hold myself up now." Her explanation dispelled Kiran's doubts. He walked her to the couch and lay her down. Yvonne's face was pale, and she seemed completely drained of energy. Worried about her illness, Kiran felt her forehead and took her pulse. After confirming nothing was wrong, he said gently, "Get some rest and you'll be fine." It was only a small, caring gesture, but it comforted Yvonne immensely and even sparked faint joy in her. Her red lips parted and she blurted out, "Do you really think I'm a stupid woman? Stupid woman." Remembering how he had scolded her earlier that day, Kiran nodded. "Don't do stupid things anymore? Just take good care of yourself." I might do stupid things again," Yvonne stammered sheepishly. "Why?" Her cheeks reddened. Because I'm willing to do anything stupid for you, even die." After saying that, she turned away hastily and buried her face on the couch, too embarrassed to look at Kiran. Warmth welled up in Kiran's heart, but he quickly suppressed it with a rueful smile. Why bother? Yvonne was taken aback by his rejection. The hope in her heart vanished instantly, and she responded with a bitter smile of her own. "Sorry, maybe I'm too wound up because I thought I was going to die today. Just forget what I said. It's okay, you should get some rest." Kiran stood up and turned to leave, not wanting to dwell on the matter any longer. You're going home," she blushed, eager for him to stay. He did not look back. "Snow's used to sleeping in my arms. I can't leave her alone. Snow sleeping in his arms?" Yvonne bit her lip, her whole body shaking violently in anguish, but she remained silent. Kiran opened the door and left. Yvonne lay on the couch, her heart throbbing with a burning, glaring pain. Finally, she slowly sat up and glanced toward the door. "You're mine, Kiran York!" Her tone was firm and adamant. After coming out, Kiran decided to go to Neptune's Cove karaoke. However, noticing how grubby he was, he hesitated for a moment before returning to Marina Breeze Court. When he arrived at the entrance, he saw that the lights were on in Serena's home, while his upstairs was pitch dark. Speculating that Golden Dragon could be black magic and remembering Serena was from the Maui tribe, he headed to her place. Serena had just stepped out of the shower. She wore a translucent black gauze dress that hugged her curves and accentuated her bewitching features. She stood in front of the mirror, admiring her outfit from front to back, wondering why Kiran was not interested in her. "Knock, knock!" Just then, there was a knock on the door. She was surprised. Kiran had gone to Dragonsmount for an indefinite period, and Snow was at Neptune's Cove karaoke. So, who could it be? She approached the door vigilantly and peered through the peephole, but she did not see Kiran, who was standing to the side. Despite her growing wariness, she opened the door calmly. After all, she had a variety of poisons hidden on her, so she was not afraid. She opened the door a crack and saw Kiran standing outside, his body caked in grime from his cave exploration. Before he could say anything, she flung the door open and threw herself into his arms in exhilaration. "Honey, you're back." This woman was as bold as ever. He could feel her body pressing against his chest, and he was at a loss for where to place his hands. There was a huge smile plastered all over Serena's face. She regretted her choice of clothing. If she had known it was Kiran, she would not have worn anything. Ahem. When she refused to get off him, Kiran cleared his throat, stepped into the house, and closed the door. Serena simply hooked her arms around his neck and clamped her legs around his waist. Her movements were so provocative that Kiran sucked in a sharp breath to quell the surge of desire in him. Sensing how hard he was fighting to contain himself, Serena let out a silvery giggle. "Honey, did you miss me? That's Mr. Kiran to you?" Kiran could not allow her madness to go on, or the unthinkable might happen. "Mr. Kiran doesn't sound as nice as honey. If Snow was here, I would call you Mr. Kiran, but now I want to call you honey." Serena ignored his reminder. Kiran shot her an exasperated glare. "Just get off me, will you? I'm here about something important." "Does it involve some action?" Serena winked, her almond-shaped eyes sparkling. "I just took a shower, so I'm clean. I don't mind you being a bit dirty either." Kiran wished he could slap her for her unruly behavior. "You can slap me here." As if she could read his mind, she grabbed his hand and guided it to her bottom. Kiran was completely defeated by her. He looked at her wearily. "I'm here on important business. Making love. Having a baby? That's all important business. Top priority, in fact." Serena teased him, chuckling. Frustrated by her absurdity, he had no choice but to change the subject. "Is there anyone in your tribe who is good at keeping snakes?" "Keeping snakes?" A surprised Serena ceased teasing, though she continued to cling to Kiran. "Of course, those who manufacture snake poison keep snakes for it. Why do you ask?" "Do you still remember the picture of the golden dragon?" Kiran asked. "Yeah. Doesn't it belong to the School of Medicine?" Serena frowned. "That's right. The thing is, I saw it on Dragonsmount, but not its owner." He told her everything that had happened on Dragonsmount that day. By the time he finished, a guarded and perturbed expression had taken over her face. Finally, she shifted her gaze to him. "You mean the golden dragon belongs to the School of Medicine, but it's actually kept to manufacture snake poison for someone else?" Kiran nodded. "That's my guess, but I'm curious why the golden dragon didn't hurt Yvonne." Serena's brows were deeply furrowed. "Was there anything strange about her when you examined her body?" "Her blood vessels were clogged and there were remnants of the healing prince's poison in her body that couldn't be eliminated," Kiran replied. Serena gradually regained her composure. She hopped off him, staring at her black-painted fingernails with a thoughtful and conflicted look in her eyes. Chapter 365. Serena raised her hand and pointed a black nail at Kiran. Under the light, her fingers shone as white as jade, and its oval-shaped black nails glinted alluringly. "What's the meaning of this?" Kiran asked in confusion, thinking she was trying to seduce him again. "I'm not seducing you. I just want to tell you that the poisons I have now are all I'll ever have." A hint of sorrow appeared on her face. "All you'll ever have? Why?" Kiran hurriedly asked. "They were left to me by my master. When she was dying, she made me swear that I would never ever practice black magic." For the first time, Serena wept. An inexplicable ache gripped Kiran's chest, and he grasped her hand. "Why?" "She said that if I do, I'll have to practice the most powerful black magic and never marry for the rest of my life." Serena gazed at him with tears in her eyes. "Her dying wish was for me to find you, marry you, and bear children for your family." Her words touched Kiran's heart, making it tremble. If Serena had said this before, he would have thought she was teasing or even tempting him, but now he knew she was being sincere. Serena's feelings for him were genuine, and so was her master's devotion to the York family. However, his heart only belonged to Snow. "Serena, I can't lie to you. Snow's the only one I love now. I don't want to make her sad, and I don't want to be a scumbag," Kiran said truthfully. "You've got the wrong idea. I'm not crying to win your sympathy or to make you accept me, but to tell you that my ties to the Maui tribe's black magic ends here." Serena's cheeks were streaked with tears of deep reluctance and disappointment. Kiran nodded in understanding, his heart heavy. But there's a type of woman in my tribe who they call the Saintess. They're the ones who truly know how to wield black magic and the most powerful black magic practitioners in our tribe besides the chieftain. They're usually very mysterious. They're discovered as children and then hidden, so no one knows where they are, Serena told him. Saintess? Kiran repeated thoughtfully. Serena nodded. They're an important guarantee for the continuation of our tribe's black magic. A Saintess will be chosen every 20 years. My master was the previous Saintess. After she died, I left the tribe, so I don't know who the current Saintess is. I only understood why my master forbade me from practicing black magic after many years. A mixture of emotions flashed across her face, mostly nostalgia for her deceased master. Why? If I did, I'd have to become the new Saintess, which meant I wouldn't be able to leave the tribe and search for you. Even in her final moments, she was still thinking of you and the York family's grievance. That's why she wanted me to leave the tribe. When she finished, she buried her face in her hands and sank to the floor, sobbing. Kiran's chest burned with a searing pain, as well as immense gratitude. Serena, her master, and the Xander family were all people who sacrificed themselves for the York family without regret. Although he had yet to find out the reason for his family's demise, it was strange that it had both betrayers and supporters. He squatted down, slipped his arms under hers, and embraced her sincerely for the first time. If I ever fall in love with a woman besides Snow, I'll choose you. She hugged him back and whispered in his ear, treat Snow well. She really loves you and wants to give you a child. As long as the York family's bloodline survives and both of you are happy, I'm happy. Instead of accepting his offer, she declined it. Once again, Kiran was shaken by her genuineness and dedication. Under her charming and alluring facade was a persevering heart. This was the real Serena Zimmerman. A woman who was willing to give, a woman who stayed true to her destiny, and a woman who moved him deeply. No wonder Snow became best friends with her. She was indeed a respectable woman. Silly girl! Kiran gave her an admonishing pat on her bottom. She shuddered, but instead of seizing the opportunity to flirt with him, she said seriously, I suspect the Saintess is the one keeping the golden dragon. Why don't you suspect the chieftain? Kiran wanted to know. The chieftain doesn't leave the tribal territory, so the one who handed over the golden dragon has to be someone with mastery of black magic. Even as my master's beloved pupil, I don't know much about black magic. Serena laid out her train of thought. Kiran calmed down, his eyes growing pensive. What do they want? Also, are all those snakes in the cave being kept by the Saintess? Not necessarily. It's likely that the snakes were driven together out of fear of the golden dragon. In this way, only the fittest would survive, and the remaining ones would emerge as the deadliest of all snakes, Serena explained. Her words enlightened Kiran. During the making of insect poisons, several venomous insects of the same kind would be caught and put together. The last surviving one would emerge as the victor which held the complex poison. Wasn't it the same as gathering the snakes in the cave and letting the survival of the fittest take hold? If that's the case, that woman is feeding her snake with Dragonsmount's spiritual energy to make it extremely powerful, Kiran deduced. I think so too, but I'm also wondering why there's a blood jade belt underground. If that's the only secret Dragonsmount holds, why would there be so much mystery surrounding the secret records of Dragonsmount? Why would the Imperial Dragon and PowerHub Investment Group go to such lengths to get their hands on it? Serena expressed her doubts. Kiran was silent for more than 10 seconds. Maybe Dragonsmount is just the tip of the iceberg in the secret records. If this tip alone has managed to shake up so much, the remaining secrets may be even greater. Serena nodded. Suddenly she said, By the way, where's the jade you mentioned? Let me see it. Kiran fished it out and handed it to her. With amazement, Serena took in the bright red blood jade and the vivid dragon on it, which seemed could come to life any time. It's radiating strong energy. If someone absorbs it, they can become really powerful. Kiran inclined his head. It brings luck. If you like it, you can have it. Me? Serena gaped at him in surprise and joy. He nodded. After pondering for a moment, she stuffed it back into his hand. Chapter 366. What's wrong? Kiran asked. It's a great item, and I really want it, but not everyone can control it. It's better to leave it to those who can, Serena said wistfully. This was the first time Kiran saw her so modest. It felt strange to him. Just try it on for a while. She shook her head again. I suggest you keep it for yourself. If my guess is correct, this jade was kept there by the Golden Dragon's owner. They'll definitely come to you at some point. It occurred to Kiran that the jade might bring trouble to her, so he nodded in agreement. Okay then. He put the jade away. Rumble. His stomach growled. Are you hungry? Serena asked softly. I haven't eaten anything the whole day. Only then did Kiran remember. Go on upstairs and take a shower, then come down for dinner later, Serena offered meekly. Kiran was aware that he needed to clean up before going to Snow. With a nod, he let go of her and went upstairs to shower. Serena gazed after him with deep love in her eyes. She truly loved him and wanted to give herself to him. She was greatly touched by his promise just now. However, she did not want him to be torn between her and Snow. To love someone was to make them happy. "Kiran, I'm willing to give you everything at any time, even my life." Murmuring, she got up and headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner like a docile wife. Half an hour later, Kiran finished taking a shower, got dressed, and went downstairs to Serena's place, which was filled with the delicious aroma of food. He was surprised to hear noises coming from the kitchen. He thought Serena would order takeout instead of making dinner herself. As he approached the kitchen, he saw her with a smile on her face, humming a little tune and cooking like a housewife, and he could not help himself from smiling too. "You can cook?" Serena was delighted to see him all cleaned up and handsome. She said teasingly, "I'm a pro on social occasions, in the kitchen, and even in the bedroom. You want to give it a try?" Knowing she was only joking, Kiran replied in an equally teasing manner, "Sure thing. Come on then." Serena swayed her hips as if she was inviting him to take her right there in the kitchen. Kiran stroked his chin, chuckling. "Why don't you teach Snow a thing or two?" "Screw you!" Serena blushed with feigned annoyance. Kiran shrugged. "I'm going to call Snow now." "Go on, get out of here!" "I don't want to be a third wheel," Serena pretended to huff. Kiran walked to the balcony, located Snow's number in his contact list, and dialed it. It only rang once before it was answered. "Kiran, how are you?" Snow's voice was full of joy and concern. "I'm back. I just took a shower. Let me grab a bite at Serena's place first, and then I'll pick you up," said Kiran. "You don't need to pick me up. I can go back on my own," Snow said excitedly. "No. For safety's sake, I'll pick you up," Kiran refused. "Okay then," Snow agreed. "Don't come here today, Kiran. I don't want to see you." Just then, Lillian's cold voice spoke. "I'm only going there to pick up Snow. I don't need to go upstairs." Kiran thought to himself. "Not like I want to see you anyway. You gave her to me, so now she's in my care. If I tell you not to come, don't," Lillian said domineeringly. "What do you mean?" Kiran was bewildered. "That's enough chit-chat. In short, she'll be here for the next 3 days." With that, she snatched the phone from Snow and hung up. Kiran listened to the busy signal in bemusement, muttering, "Is she jealous? Who's jealous?" Serena happened to bring out the food at that moment. Lillian said, "I can't fetch Snow home." I asked why, and she said Snow won't be back for 3 days. "She's absolutely nuts," Kiran grumbled. "Pfft." Serena let out a snort of laughter, then suggested expectantly, "How about you stay with me for the next 3 days? Kiran glared at her. "Now you are the one being nuts." "I'm serious. I'm just as attractive as Snow. I promise you'll be satisfied." Serena tried to seduce him. "Let's eat. I have something to do later." Ignoring her invitation, Kiran picked up his fork and began to eat. "Does it involve us being in the same bed?" Serena persisted with her teasing. Kiran shot her an exasperated look. Where had all her seriousness just now gone? He lowered his attention back to his bowl and ignored her. "Is the food good?" Instead of being offended, she asked with a smile. "Yeah. I didn't know you were such a good cook," Kiran complimented her. "I slipped a love poison into it, you know." She giggled. "Don't worry. No matter what poison you put inside, it can't kill me." Kiran returned the joke. Serena's face shone with joy, for his trust was the best respect he could give her. She picked up her fork and looked at Kiran, who was devouring his food. "Slow down. If you like my cooking, I can cook for you more often in the future." Kiran nodded but did not slow down. However, Lillian's warning lingered in his mind. What did she mean? Was there some kind of danger? He immediately associated the possibility of danger with Panthergate. "A penny for your thoughts. You're distracted again," Serena pointed out. "Now that PowerHub Investment Group's forces in Bayville are dead, I wonder what methods they will take to get revenge." Kiran's eating pace slowed. Serena nodded. "I've finished setting up my investment company, but I haven't started investing yet. I'm waiting for your instructions. Just hold on to the money and wait for now. When the opportunity comes, take action immediately," said Kiran. "Okay," Serena agreed. "Our current focus is on the Imperial Dragon. I think we need to ruffle their feathers a bit more and lure out the head honcho." Murderousness surged in Kiran's eyes. "You think the Imperial Dragon will rush to kill you after suffering a huge loss because they have a lot of strong fighters?" Kiran nodded. "Theoretically, yes." He dabbed at the corners of his mouth. "Logically speaking, PowerHub won't seek revenge through violence since that's not what they do best," so it's very likely that they will take advantage of investments. Now that Xander Corporation's scorched earth policy has left nothing for them to target, you can spring an attack on them at any time. That makes sense. But will the Imperial Dragon be too powerful for us to handle? Serena expressed her concern. If I were alone, I wouldn't be afraid. A thoughtful look appeared on Kiran's face. Serena fell silent. Kiran set his bowl down on the table. It's time to make a decision. Chapter 367. What do you mean? Sensing his killing intent, Serena asked anxiously. I'm going to kill those people from the Imperial Dragon who stole the secret records of Dragonsmount, Kiran answered, his face impassive. Have you thought it through? Serena attempted to calm him down. Yes. Right now, I need to kill them and make Lillian join my side. Is that even possible? Well, agreed to help me protect Snow, didn't she? Kiran decided to shamelessly take advantage of the engagement his mother had left behind. In his opinion, Lillian was aware of the engagement and even worried about it, so it only made sense that she would help him. Don't take advantage of a woman too much. It'll make you look like a scumbag and you'll hurt her feelings too. Serena was shrewd enough to see through his intentions. I don't have a choice now. Kiran rose to his feet. For the sake of my ambition, I can't be bothered about trivial matters. If I can avenge my family, I don't mind becoming a villain in the eyes of other people. You... Serena seemed somewhat angry and disappointed. Serena, if my family was powerful back then and had help from your master and other people but still ended up being destroyed, what does that say about the enemy's strength? Now that I've stirred up hatred, I'll only grant the enemy more time to plan and prepare if I don't end things quickly. When they attack, I'll be the one who gets the short end of the stick, Kiran said evenly. Serena regained her composure. In that case, I'll trust your judgment, but I'd still advise you against using a woman's feelings. You can say I'm using Lillian's feelings, but that's not completely true. There was a solemn and ambivalent expression on Kiran's face. How so? Since she has ties with my mother, she'll definitely want to avenge her. Doesn't this count as cooperation? Serena nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. My focus now is to stir up conflict between PowerHub and the Imperial Dragon and prevent them from cooperating. Then, I'll lure out the mastermind behind them. If this mastermind seeks cooperation, they'll definitely intervene and expose more of their forces. If there's no mastermind, then I can go on a killing spree, which is also a good thing. Kiran analyzed the situation. Serena agreed with his analysis. Sounds like a plan. Don't worry about my safety. I can protect myself. Nothing will happen to any of you. Kiran looked at her steadily. Even if someone has to die, it'll be me first. Kiran! Her eyes misted over. I can't wait another day to see my family rise and get revenge. Kiran's voice had a whirlpool of emotions, including sorrow and anguish. Serena nodded, her expression tender. I get it. Thank you. With that, Kiran turned and left. Serena hurried over to the window and glanced downstairs. Kiran's lonely figure appeared under the streetlights. He seemed so weak yet so strong. Alone, he shouldered his family's vengeance and his beloved's happiness. Take care of yourself, Kiran. I'll do anything to help you, even if I have to die. Serena raised a hand to wipe away the tears on her cheeks. Meanwhile, Kiran rushed to Bayville Family Hotel to kill the people from Panthergate. Somewhere in the shadows, unbeknownst to him, Lauren dialed Lillian's number. Bayville Family Hotel. Sprawled on the couch, Simon glared at the women massaging him. Are you being starved or something? I can't feel a damn thing. The women flinched in fright and tried to muster their strength, but to no avail. Exasperated, Simon glanced at his subordinates in the room. Have you investigated the situation on Dragonsmount? B-Boss, for some reason we feel sick and weak. The ones we sent out came back without even climbing up Dragonsmount. Trash. You're all trash, Simon bellowed. Everyone bowed their heads, too scared to make a sound. Did someone poison us? Just like them, Simon had found himself growing weaker and weaker after waking up. We don't know either, but everyone in the building is experiencing the same thing, and the receptionist's condition is even worse, one of his subordinates reported. Simon was increasingly convinced that something was wrong, that they had been poisoned. After a moment of stony silence, he looked at one of his men. Get a doctor here immediately to find out what's going on. Is it okay for people like us to see a doctor? The man asked. What else can we do in our current state? What if it gets worse? Simon roared. He was almost certain that this was a plot against him. Yes, boss. The man hastily turned to leave. Bang! The door suddenly flew open, and a subordinate came running in frantically, his legs nearly giving out. What happened? Simon forced himself to sit up, his eyes on the man. We received a warning from Foxgate telling us to leave right away. They said Kiran York has returned from Dragonsmount and is on his way to kill us, the man said quickly. What? Simon exploded. The subordinate who was just about to leave jumped in alarm. Kiran was already terrifying on his own. Now that they had been poisoned, wouldn't it be easier for him to take them out? He could feel the grim reaper eyeing his soul gleefully. Simon shouted angrily, "Let's go!" Summoning his strength, he hurriedly departed from the room and headed downstairs. The other people in the building supported each other as they rushed out in panic, preparing to flee. Meanwhile, Kiran was approaching the Bayville family hotel. Just then, he caught sight of Snow's car parked next to the curb with its hazard lights on, and he anxiously drove over. When he realized that the person inside was Lillian, he exited his car and strode up to her. "Where's my wife?" For some reason, hearing him ask about his wife triggered an indescribable wave of emotions and sadness in Lillian, but she soon composed herself. "Kiran, what will you do if Snow disappears one day?" "I'll go to the ends of the earth to find her," Kiran answered determinedly. "What if she's dead?" Lillian pressed on. "Then, I'll kill every single person who played a part in her death and then join her in the afterlife. Don't you want to avenge and revive your family? Are you willing to give up everything just for a woman?" Kiran's heart trembled slightly under the surge of conflicting feelings, but in the end, he said firmly, "The Xander family has sacrificed too much for the York family. I can't let them down. What's more, Snow's parents suffered for 15 years for my family's sake, so I can't betray her either." After a pause, he added, "Besides, I can't betray all the love she's given me." His words echoed in the air in the hearts of two people. Hiding nearby, Snow was drowning in tears. Chapter 368. "You're really in love with Snow, aren't you?" Lillian snickered. "Yes, Snow is the only woman I love now. She's everything to me. I'm willing to give up my life and everything I have for her," Kiran admitted frankly. "And you're willing to abandon your family just for her sake?" Lillian asked coldly. Kiran nodded without hesitation. "Without the Xander family, the York family wouldn't exist. Have you forgotten the others who sacrificed themselves for the York family? Margaret, Rain, Serena, your master, didn't they all devote themselves to the York family? And you're willing to give up everything for Snow's sake?" Lillian challenged incredulously. "I know, but Snow's my wife now. If I watched my wife die without trying to protect her, what point would there be in rebuilding the York family? She and I make up the face of the family," Kiran declared emphatically. "I think you're an irrational nutcase." Lillian flared up. "One moment you say the York family is important, and the next you say you're willing to die for Snow. There's no contradiction at all. This is what unity looks like. Without Snow, where would the York family be? We're one in spirit. In fact, we're one body too." "Have you slept together?" Lillian blushed in embarrassment, seeming somewhat nervous. "No." Kiran shook his head. Lillian looked relieved. "You call that undying love? You don't actually mean it, do you?" "That's between me and Snow. I'm not obliged to explain it to you," Kiran retorted coldly. "What are you doing here?" "I just wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with you." Lillian calmed down. "I don't have time now. There's something I need to do." Kiran was in a hurry to butcher Simon and his followers. "If you're going to Bayville Family Hotel, forget it. I informed Simon that you're on your way to kill them. They've probably run away by now," Lillian said coolly. "You're stalling me." The truth angered Kiran. "What, you gonna kill me?" Lillian sneered. "You..." Kiran was exasperated. Naturally, he would not kill her. "What? You should thank me for giving you a chance to confess your love to Snow. She's probably weeping tears of joy now." Lillian's tone suddenly softened. "What do you mean?" Kiran was puzzled. "Kiran!" Snow dashed out from her hiding spot, her cheeks streaked with tears. "Snow!" Despite his surprise, Kiran rushed over to her. Lillian darted a disappointed glance at them. This man no longer belonged to her. Silently, she turned and left. Kiran and Snow hugged each other tightly. Neither spoke, but their genuine love for each other was already conveyed. Kiran's words just now were the best confession. They continued to embrace each other for a long time. Snow was unwilling to leave Kiran's arms. To her, this was the stable happiness she dreamed of. Eventually, Kiran raised a hand and patted her shoulder gently. "Let's go home." He knew he had missed his chance to kill Simon, and there was no point in going after him now. Now that Snow was here, he would stay with her. Snow nodded. Side by side, they cruised the streets in their matching Ferraris. When they stopped at the traffic light, they exchanged a tender glance, their love running thicker and deeper in silence than in sound. Just like that, they returned to their home happily. As soon as they entered the apartment, Snow wrapped her arms around Kiran. She did not say a word, but her eyes shone with love. Thinking she might not be feeling well, Kiran smiled and said, "You should rest up." "There are other methods I can use," Snow said sweetly. Kiran was overjoyed, but instead of messing with her, he carried her to the bedroom and fell asleep with his arms around her. Both slept soundly, immersed in bliss. It was a peaceful night in Bayville. The three big families were now no braver than mice. The destruction of Wolfgate had reduced them to meek lambs waiting for Kiran to pronounce their fate. Both Yvonne and Serena went to bed docilely. As for Lillian, she sat alone in front of her harp, a myriad of expressions flashing across her face. Kiran's love confession for Snow had come entirely from the heart. She had expected this result, but now that it had played out, she could not stomach it. Therefore, her heart was consumed by a burning, glaring pain and emotional ambivalence. She sat alone until daybreak. As for Simon and his followers, they had already disappeared without a trace. They knew they had barely escaped with their lives, but they did not feel an ounce of gratitude to Foxgate and Lillian. On the contrary, they continued to hate her for not helping them enough. The next morning, Kiran awoke to a strange sensation. He opened his eyes only to find that Snow had slid under the covers like a mischievous child. His face and eyes lit up with delight and love. Never in his wildest dreams had he imagined that girl boss and ice princess Snow Xander would take the initiative to pleasure him. Just when he was ready to enjoy himself, the door opened with a click. Startled by the sound, Snow scrambled out from under the covers, tugging on Kiran in the process and causing him to yelp in pain. "What's wrong, Kiran?" Serena asked in concern as she hurried over, blushing furiously. Snow clamped her hands over Kiran's mouth and widened her eyes warningly at him to prevent him from saying more than he should. Naturally, Kiran could not bear to embarrass her. He nodded with a fond smile, then hopped onto the floor and shouted toward the door, "I'm fine!" At that moment, Serena came in. Snow smiled sleepily at her as if she had just awakened. "You're here?" Serena was quick to pick up on the sensual atmosphere in the room and the color on Snow's cheeks, and her gaze drifted immediately to Kiran. Although he was putting on his clothes, the evidence of his desire was undisguisable. "I'm so sorry. Why don't you continue?" Serena chuckled. Snow was mortified that they had ultimately been discovered. She flushed and shot daggers at Kiran, wishing she could crawl under the blankets immediately. Kiran gave her an innocent look. It was not his fault his body refused to lie. He was, in fact, the victim here. This would not have happened if Snow had not given Serena the keys to their apartment. He sucked in a breath and turned to Serena. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to see if you guys were back. Also, the police have found the secret records on Dragonsmount in the Bayville Family Hotel and sent them back to Bayville University. They're currently investigating the deaths of Zachary and the others." Serena briefed them on the situation. Kiran finished getting dressed and turned to her. "Forget about the secret records for now. Find a way to leak the news of Zachary's death to the public. Just say that there was a conflict between him and PowerHub Investment Group, and they both died in the end." Serena instantly understood that he was trying to sow discord, and the corners of her mouth curved up. "Got it." Kiran suddenly thought of Lindsay, and a big smile appeared on his face. Chapter 369. Serena was immediately able to tell from Kiran's smile that he was plotting something. "You're up to no good again, aren't you?" Kiran turned red and scowled at her. "What do you mean? You make me sound like a bad guy." "That's because you are a bad guy," Serena quipped, all traces of the demure woman the previous night gone. "Come here. Let me tell you something." Refusing to argue with her, Kiran beckoned her over. Serena sauntered over to him, eager to let him whisper in her ear. She was wearing a matching sky blue blouse and skirt, which accentuated her slim shoulders and waist and hugged her shapely legs. The hem of the skirt reached the middle of her thighs, offering a full, appealing view of her slender legs. The color of her skin was visible under her thin black stockings, which added to her allure. In her haste to enter the house, she had forgotten to change her shoes. The black stilettos on her feet pressed light marks into her stockings, making them look even more seductive. Her outfit instantly ignited the fire Snow had sparked in Kiran. Seemingly oblivious to his reaction, she approached his side and lowered her head, bringing her right ear to his lips. Kiran caught a glimpse of cleavage out of the corner of his eye. He quickly closed his eyes and said quietly, "I need you to go to the airport now. A woman called Lindsay Ludwig may come to Bayville. If she does, find out where she lives and let me know." Serena had not expected that he had beckoned her over to tell her this. Her gaze flitted to Snow, who was watching them curiously from the bed, and her first thought was that Kiran was having designs on Lindsay. However, before she could speak, he added, "Also, I need you to recruit a few men and get them to lie in wait for her." She gaped slightly at him. A cruel smirk was plastered all over his face. At once, Serena realized that she had misunderstood him. Apparently, he intended to teach Lindsay a lesson. "Who is she to Hans Ludwig?" "She's his eldest sister," Kiran replied. Serena snapped her fingers gleefully. "Leave it to me! I promise you'll be satisfied." Kiran rubbed his nose in exasperation. What did this have to do with his satisfaction? Lindsay Ludwig was the target here. However, he did not argue back. Serena whirled around, swaying her hips, and winked at Snow. "Good luck, Snow. If you need advice, you can always come to me." "Screw you." Flustered that Serena had noticed her inexperience, Snow grabbed a pillow and threw it at her friend in mock irritation. Serena dodged it and even deliberately lifted a leg. Abruptly presented with a view of her crotch, Kiran hastily turned his head and closed his eyes. "Ha-ha!" Laughing heartily, Serena cast an encouraging look at Snow and ran out. Kiran and Snow heaved a thankful sigh when they heard the door closing. However, Snow's relief did not last for long because Kiran was already advancing on her. He could hardly help himself from behaving like a perv after being tempted by two babes. An hour later, he took breakfast from Margaret's place next door and laid it out on the table for Snow. Snow's stomach rumbled at the sight of the spread, but she kept shaking her wrists and grumbling, "Ah, I'm so sore." Kiran dropped his head to hide the amusement in his eyes. He did not respond and pretended to focus on his food. Annoyed, Snow stretched her leg and stomped on his foot under the table with all her might. Kiran wanted to retract his foot but gave up when he met her warning gaze. "Honey, let me feed you." He brought a piece of egg white to her lips. Instead of eating it, Snow covered her mouth, raced into the bathroom, and started vomiting. Kiran was baffled. Was his wife pregnant? This was unscientific. Snow abruptly recalled the image of raw eggs and her insides churned again. Kiran finished breakfast alone with a clueless look on his face. However, his heart was full of doubt and confusion. Meanwhile, Serena was on her way to the airport. There were only 5 people in the first-class cabin on the plane to Bayville. They had reserved the entire cabin for themselves. Sitting in the main seat in the center was a woman. She was around 26 or 7 years old, with skin as white as snow, long flowing hair, beautiful almond eyes, and a cold, haughty look on her oval face. She was dressed in a black gauze dress, its color complemented by the glimpses of her skin underneath. She was at the age when a woman's youth transitioned into maturity, and it granted her a touch of feminine charm. Even though she was just sitting there, the perfect curves of her figure were on full display. The lights in the plane shone on her face, bathing her in pure white radiance and making her appear dazzling. If she jumped off the plane, she would look like a fairy descending from the heavens. Her beauty was dazzling, and her womanly allure could light someone's blood on fire and even arouse a monk. In each of the 4 corners sat a man. They exuded strong, belligerent auras, and their gazes were sharp as if they were ready to attack at any time. The woman was Lindsay, the eldest daughter of the Ludwig family. Black was her symbolic color, and also the color she remained faithful to. Those who knew her called her Black Widow in private because even though they knew she was married, they had never seen her husband. His name was the only thing they knew about him. In fact, they could hardly be certain if he even existed at all. Therefore, the name Black Widow had become synonymous with this dark, mysterious woman. Lindsay was unbothered by the title. On the contrary, she seemed rather fond of it, and she constantly strived to prove that it suited her. After arguing with Kiran on the phone the previous day, she ordered her subordinates to book a chartered flight to Bayville. Right now, all she could think about was meeting Kiran and killing him. As she recalled him saying that he wanted to sleep with her, Hans's death, and the Ludwig family's loss, she wished she could stab him to death. This time, she had brought 4 men with her, Windsor, Rainier, Thor, and Bolt, who were all much stronger than Gregory. Therefore, she was extremely confident. She had chosen not to bring along any weaklings in case they ended up as cannon fodder and affected her morale. Glancing down, she saw that the plane was beginning to make its descent, and cruel smugness appeared in her eyes. "Kiran York, it's time for you to die." Chapter 370. The plane landed, and the 5 of them disembarked. Lindsay led the way, followed by her WRTL, her 4 bodyguards. She was already stunning and sexy in black. Standing 5 feet 7 inches tall, she captivated everyone as she strutted through the airport. The most enticing part of her was her feet. Despite her tall figure, her feet were not big. They were slim and narrow, and her slender toes were painted with red nail polish, adding a delicate touch to their overall appearance. Black stockings covered them, but the color of her skin underneath was unconcealable, and being partly hidden only gave them an air of mystery. With such gorgeous feet, it would be a waste if she did not become a foot model. Almost every man's eyes lit up when they saw her. They gulped and were unwilling to tear their gazes away from her. However, they quickly walked away, for she emanated an overwhelming aura that discouraged them from staring at her. The five exited the airport and got into a car waiting for them. Serena watched them closely from her vehicle. Although she had not known who Lindsay was before this, she had her methods of finding out. While she was waiting, she searched Lindsay's information and passport photo. The woman was even more stunning in person than in the photo, and this realization brought a smile to Serena's lips. She snapped a few pictures from naughty angles, but the best shot, in her opinion, was Lindsay getting into the car. The tantalizing view of her cleavage and the smooth curve of her back when she bent over could definitely drive men to commit crimes. With one foot in the car and the other on the ground, she offered a perfect view of her round backside, so irresistible that even Serena, a woman, had the urge to grope it. When Lindsay's car left, she did not immediately follow. Instead, she beautified the photos and even highlighted the eye-catching parts before sending them to Kiran. Kiran and Snow had just finished breakfast happily. When he received the message, he tapped on the image. The next instant, his eyes blazed, not with lust, but with fury ignited by Serena. What was this perverted behavior? It would make sense if a man had done it, not a woman. Snow drew close and burst out laughing at the photo. Kiran was exasperated. This woman will be the death of me. She's a perv through and through. I thought men liked it when women behaved that way, Snow remarked playfully. Surprised by her boldness, Kiran pretended to leer at her. How about you dress up like this for me? Screw you! Snow's dainty fists landed on him. You scoundrel! I'd like to see you in sexy lingerie. Kiran caught her fists and teased her with an intent expression. You... Snow bared her teeth and made to bite him. Chuckling, Kiran dodged and said, I'll buy a set for you later. Perv. Snow flushed furiously and yelled at him. Kiran was already at the door. He waved to her with an irritating smirk and shouted, I'm gonna go shopping now. Get lost! Snow grabbed a teddy bear and hurled it at him. Kiran caught it and waved it at her before dashing out. Pfiff! Snow could not help herself from laughing out loud as well. Blushing, she ran into her room, rummaged through her closet, and eventually fished out a lingerie set. It was the black maid outfit Serena had bought for her to seduce Kiran, but she had never worn it. Now, however, Kiran had asked for it himself. Her cheeks were burning as she slipped it on. A glance at her reflection in the mirror made her wish she could curl up and die. Creak! Just then, the security door opened and in walked Kiran. Snow was standing in front of the mirror, facing away from him, leaving the alluring curves of her back on full display to him. Through the mirror, he could see the front of her body, too. The simultaneous view of her front and back was an unexpected feast for the eyes. The shock of his sudden return glued Snow to the spot for a few seconds, until blood started flowing from Kiran's nose. It was practically gushing out. He hurriedly tilted his head back to stop the bleeding. Snow finally snapped out of her daze. Ah! Shrieking, she bolted into her room and slammed the door shut. Kiran hastily stuffed a piece of tissue into his nose to stop the bleeding and walked to the door of Snow's room. Honey, shut up, Snow wailed. If you say another word, I'll end myself. The grin on Kiran's face broadened. You got me wrong, honey. I just wanted to ask you something. Snow changed out of her costume and stared warily at the door, afraid he would barge in the next second. Well, what is it about? Open the door first and then I'll talk, Kiran said seriously. Die, you perv. The first thought that occurred to Snow was that Kiran intended to ogle and tease her. Theft! Kiran could not contain his laughter. What are you laughing at? Snow demanded furiously through the door. Why are you so shy? We've already bared ourselves to each other. I really have something to ask you. Kiran continued solemnly outside. Snow was still annoyed, but she could not deny that they no longer had anything to hide from each other. After all, they had slept in the same bed, and she had even helped him find release. She was just abashed that she had appeared in such a provocative outfit. She put on her pajamas and opened the door with flushed cheeks. Kiran's gaze raked over her pink cotton top fitting her body snugly, and his heart trembled violently with the urge to crush her to his chest. The obvious knowledge that she was not wearing a bra underneath only fueled the fire inside him. Don't you dare look, Snow warned when she noticed his agitation. Kiran was extremely endeared by her behavior. Lifting a hand, he moved a few strands of hair away from her face and found her cheek hot under his touch, a clear indicator of her shyness. I wanted to ask you where you bought that outfit. Snow's eyes widened in shock. The next second, go to hell. She was close to tears. She had not expected him to ask that question in such a serious manner. Was he trying to embarrass her further? She raised her leg to stomp on his foot. Kiran dodged effortlessly and enveloped her in his embrace. He continued earnestly, I want that maid costume. I'm gonna end myself. Assuming he wanted her to wear it, Snow hurled herself against him bashfully. As usual, Kiran easily fended off her attack by restraining her, chuckling. Why are you so flustered? I'm planning to buy it for Lindsay Ludwig as a gift. Well, what did you say? Snow stared at him, dumbfounded. He smiled and nodded. You heard me. I'm buying it for Lindsay. Snow's face darkened.